Mr. President, members of the Senate, we were all home last week for 2 weeks during our state work periods, and it was a good time to get back to reality, as I call it, because we all know here in Washington, people aren't always operating in reality. If we were, we wouldn't be seeing some of the policies that's coming out as we speak. These state work periods are a great time to hear directly from the people we represent, and that's who we work for, what we care about, and how they're affected by what is happening here in our nation's capital. And this is what folks back in Alabama were talking about. They're talking about small businesses, can't find people to work because the government's paying more unemployment benefits than folks make on the job. And that's understandable. We've got to understand that, and we've got to understand the problem and how we rectify that problem. But we need workers in the state of Alabama in the worst way, almost in every business and manufacturing. They were talking about an economy that's hurting, really hurting, hardworking Americans. They were talking about the real cost of rising inflation, rising on price and goods, services that the average family possesses. While driving around, I filled my truck up with gas. The cost was double what I spent just a few months ago. And that affects every American in this country. And by the way, in June, consumer prices increased 5.4%. I got an earful. I got an earful from people about bread, eggs, milk, all across the state of Alabama. And I'm sure that people in Alabama are not alone in their concerns. This didn't happen by accident. This is a direct result of us up here spending way too much money, flooding the country with money that is out in, I call invisible money, out there just going into people's pockets that either they're saving, putting in stock market, or spending on goods. This makes the timing of the president's proposed tax increases even worse. Simply put, President Biden's proposal is launching an all-out assault on the working Americans in this country, people that work hard for the money they put in their pocket to pay for the things that their family needs. Altogether, President Biden has called for 30, let me repeat that, 30 different tax increases on the American people that total over $3 trillion. This is the worst time that we could be pushing a new tax increase, especially during this pandemic, which we thought was coming to a close, but it looks like we're not even close to that. So this would be the worst time for us to be raising taxes. Businesses and families have worked very hard to make progress after a very, very tough year and a half. And it's been tough. Higher taxes would set most, if not all, back even farther. The President's budgets lay down a marker. They illustrate the priorities of an administration. They spotlight areas where the American public can expect a political emphasis. Well, with his budget, President Biden has telegraphed the types of tax increases that in Congress can deploy to pay for his progressive policies. We're sure to see a few of them in the new reconciliation package. I'm not going to talk about all 30 proposals, but just let's take a look at some of the big tax increases that President Biden is going to propose. President Biden wants to raise the corporate rate from 21 to 28%. That was lowered just a couple of years ago. That put money in people's pockets all across the country. Now we're going to raise it from 21 to 28% on corporations. And that's not a tax on corporations, that's a tax on the people that work across this country, especially for the corporations. If our Democratic colleagues get their way, Communist China will have a lower corporate tax rate than the United States. Let me repeat that. If our colleagues pass this tax, we will have a higher tax rate, corporate tax rate, than China. Take a moment to think about that. The Biden budget targets certain industries that our Democratic colleagues don't like. The oil and gas industry, which supports more than 10 million good-paying jobs in this country, would face nearly $150 billion in industry-specific tax increases. That's in addition to the already massive corporate tax increase. Once again, the president is undoing the progress made over the last few years. The United States became fully, and I mean fully, energy independent for the first time in decades. And a net exporter, we exported oil and natural gas. What are we doing now? We're buying it. Since Biden has come into office, we have become increasingly dependent on Saudi Arabia, OPEC, and Russia for oil and gas. Colleagues on the left want the government to subsidize expensive and inefficient energy like wind and solar so we can put oil and gas out of business. And we're all for natural energy. But you can't do it all at one time. You cannot do it all at one time. Just look at the people on the Keystone Pipeline who are out of work. They were told they would get shovel-ready jobs. I hear from them every day. There's no jobs out there for them like they had working on the Keystone Pipeline. Many other preferred green energy sources require critical minerals that only China produces. Enforcing their Green New Deal policies on Americans, our Democratic colleagues are forcing us to be more dependent on China for key resources. And I want to say one thing about what's going on in China. They're getting ready to use a molten salt reactor that we invented years and years ago that we decided not to use. Now they're starting to build them, and we're helping. We're helping China become energy independent off of coal in the future because of these nuclear reactors. We invented it and we shut it down. And now we're going to help China with the progress of putting these in all over their country. All of this will effectively be a tax on regular working and middle-class Americans, since their energy bills will go sky high as a result of this all-out assault on our oil and gas. It makes no sense. Not content with raising taxes at home, our president wants to implement a 21% global minimum tax on income U.S. businesses earn overseas. Now, they're going to pay taxes overseas already, and we're going to turn around and tax them 21% more. Again, this is basically a double tax on the companies with international operations. Since they already have to pay taxes overseas too, this tax would destroy American competitiveness. It would incentivize U.S. firms to headquarters overseas and move production offshore. We have got to rethink that. We've got to rethink it. Again, we are working for the American people, not for us here. President Biden is also calling for a 15% global corporate minimum tax based on the misguided assumption that other world powers will play fair. Well, I can guarantee you one thing: Russia and China are not going to play fair. We cannot count on anybody other than our allies. Everybody else is on their own. And even for the countries that do play fair, this international rate is lower than the 28% rate that companies headquartered in the United States would have to pay. So what does that mean? It means inversions are going to spread like wildfire, and large business and corporations are going to move their headquarters overseas. We cannot allow that to happen. We're going to lose jobs. What's more, the president's budget calls to increase the IRS's budget by $80 billion over the next decade and add thousands of new agents. The president wants even more tax collectors to knock on your door and shake you down for all you're worth. I don't know if you've ever been audited. I have several times. It ain't a lot of fun. So what we're going to do is we're going to add even more people. If you get a tax return, you're going to be audited. If you get some kind of refund, they're coming. And we're talking about the same agency that aggressively targeted conservative groups and individuals during the Obama administration. Now, that another Democrat in the White House, the IRS is up to their old tactics again. We cannot politicize the IRS again. In just the past few months, the IRS has leaked tax returns on American taxpayers to other groups. Now, to me, that really needs to be investigated. It all has gone down in the wash. For some reason, nobody's looking at this. Even more outrageous, news recently broke that Christian organization based in Texas was denied tax-exempt status by the IRS. They were denied. Why? Because the IRS, for some reason, thinks the Bible is too close and too closely associated with the Republican Party. That is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. It's sad commentary on where America is today. What's next? Is the IRS going to start pulling tax-exempt status from churches? I hope not. But we adding all these other agents, we're going to run into more and more problems. Before Congress even thinks about giving the IRS a dime more, the agency must demonstrate that it treats all Americans, and I repeat, all Americans equally, and protects their personal tax information. Individuals responsible for the most recent leak must be prosecuted. We've got to get control of the IRS. For some reason, they are out of control. Sadly, there's more. The President's administration also has its sights on small business owners. And this is huge in my state and a lot of other small states in this country, especially in farming communities. Business owners, family farmers, middle-class Americans who would like to pass on to their children what they have worked so hard to build. By ending the long-standing step-up basis rule, the President would force anyone who inherits something to pay capital gains tax on that asset at the time of inheritance. I want you to think about what that's going to do to millions of people, millions of family members. This doesn't just apply to folks who inherit millions in wealth, and I know, as we all know, that's probably what this is aimed at. It would slam middle-class folks who inherit family farmland or a house or a small business. And I'm going to say this, campaigning for 2 years, going throughout my state of Alabama and talking to our farmers, if we lose our family farms in this country to big corporations, we're going to be in huge trouble. And this is exactly what this is going to do. If we tax them at the time of inheritance, we're going to have huge problems. Many would have to sell their businesses just to pay taxes, destroying American jobs in the process. We need to give incentives to small businesses, farmers and like, to make sure they understand and know that they can work hard and pass it down from generation to generation. Opposition to this particular tax increase is bipartisan. Congressman David Scott of Georgia, chairman of the House Agriculture Committee and a Democrat, wrote to President Biden saying, "Step up in basis is a critical tool enabling family farming operations to continue from generation to generation. The potential for capital gains to be imposed on heirs at death of the landowner would impose a significant financial burden on these operations." This is a terrible tax on small business and the American people. So I agree with the congressman. The American dream is about working hard so that your kids can have a better life than you did. That's why my parents worked so hard to give me and my brother and sister a chance. My dad never made over $15,000 a year, and we thought we were rich. We were actually poor, but they never let on to that. But they worked hard to give us an opportunity to go to school, get an education. I know millions of mothers and fathers across the country feel the same way. So when you boil it down, the tax plan is really just a tax on the American dream. We cannot take away the American dream from the American people. That's what we've lived off of. That's what we believe in. So why did we need to raise taxes so badly? In order to obviously finance all the money that in the last year and a half or 2 years that we pushed out into the public and for what we're going to do in the future. We've got a tax. I keep hearing people say, well, we're not going to raise taxes. Oh, let me tell you, money doesn't grow on trees. And we better find some way to understand that in the very near future, or we're going to lose the future of our kids in this country. But we can't let any of these tax proposals creep into the legislation that we're seeing. We can't let them do that. We can't let our policies overtake the things that will overcome our kids' future. And not just our kids. I used to say it was our kids and grandkids. Heck, it's us too. We're getting to the point now of no return. But we're looking at a package here in the next few weeks that's going to be $3.5 or possibly even more trillion dollars. That's unfathomable to me. It's hard to understand. We've got to get this country back going again after the pandemic. Let the American people do it. We don't need to do it in this building. That's not our obligation. Our obligation is to give the people of this country an opportunity to get a job, because growth and prosperity is what's made this country great. And that's what we need to continue to do. The root of the problem, I believe, is that a lot of people think that they can spend the hardworking people's money better than they can. They say, trust us, because big government knows best. Folks, big government is going to put us under, 6 feet under. Governments have been making that argument to people for centuries. And I would say this, as growing up, look at the things that we as government have taken control of. And you name me one thing that's been prosperous. I've thought long and hard, and it doesn't work. We've got to allow it to happen through small businesses and corporations. Kings and queens would demand more money from the people, but the monarchy felt that they were entitled to it. That was normal throughout the world until the United States was formed. We formed this country because of kings and queens saying, we know how to spend your money. We know how to spend your money more than you do. So the founders wanted a country that was of and by and for the people. And that is why the United States of America was formed, because the people built this country, not government. Thankfully, they set up a system that allows us to voice our opposition to taxes through democratic means. When the government tries to raise taxes, the American people have the opportunity to let their voices be heard at the ballot box. Just remember that when you earn, grow, and work hard to preserve your money, it is your money, not the government's. Our president would do well to remember that he serves at the will of the American people and not the other way around. I notice the absence of a quorum, Mr. President.
Clerk will call the roll. From Illinois.
As consent, the quorum call be suspended.